Welcome back to Draw Talk. This is a very special episode. This is the episode where Nolan strikes down all those around him because nothing goes right in his life. I've tried recording this episode maybe like 15 times now. Every single time something goes wrong. Sometimes the microphone just kind of stops. I don't know why. Sometimes the door gets opened or something. Sometimes the wind chimes outside kind of go crazy. But I've dealt with everything. I've taped the wind chimes up. I've taped the door closed. I've taped the microphone in place. Everything should be fine. Yeah, everything is good. Today's a very special episode. I'm going to show you the technique of how to put fake into real. How to compositing fake images into real life. A technique I kind of figured out on my own based on other techniques. Jamie Hewlett, he probably does this a lot in his stuff. You'll see it a lot in his Gorillas work. This was just kind of an experiment, and I really like this style. First thing you're going to need, well, I suppose I should list all the things you're going to need. You're going to need a photo. You're going to need an editing program. I use Sketchbook Pro. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to be doing a watercolor, meaning I'm going to be using watercolor paper, a pencil, a pen, and watercolors, of course. Pencil doesn't have to be anything special. I usually do something with a really rough pencil and then use a finer pencil to add little details. Then I go in with a pen. For the pen, I use a Micron 0.25 millimeter lead ink pen. They work really well. They are not water soluble. Once they're dry, they're really good. They work really well with watercolors, as I found out. And for watercolors, I'm going to be using Winsor and Newton watercolors. Very high quality. You get a lot of use out of the very small patties. They're very potent, I suppose. You add just a little bit of water and you get a very, very good color. They're really nice. I really enjoy them. They work very well. I'm just going to be walking you through the process. First, of course, you're going to need your photo. I don't remember where I took this. This was probably like a dirty back alley or something. Doesn't matter. Take your photo. You're going to need to slap that into Sketchbook Pro. Save your project, of course. Make sure you're saving every like 5 seconds. You'll see me doing that throughout the video. Next, what you're going to need to do is move over to... Next, what you're going to need to do is kind of map out where you want your character to be. I put my character kind of in the center of the road using the rule of thirds. I kind of wanted him more off to the side than I wanted him smack dab in the middle. The rule of thirds is essentially that things are best displayed if they're slightly off to the side, in a third of the screen. Usually use imaginary lines that run down the center of the screen, splitting it into thirds, or not screen, but vision, or whatever. That's the rule of thirds. People find it more appealing to the eyes when something's off towards the sides, whether it's off towards the left, off towards the right, or you have an even thing where there's one in the middle and one to each side. People just enjoy it a little bit more. The rule of thirds just kind of rings true. Not sure what it is, just something in our brains. As you can see here though, I've been kind of roughly sketching out the character using a really big lead. This way I can kind of get an idea of what pose I want the character in. I go over that for a couple of minutes, just kind of roughly getting an idea. It doesn't turn out... It's not supposed to be perfect at this point. It's just kind of a rough idea. And I think it works fine as that. After I'm done with that, I go through with a finer pencil. This is nothing special. I believe it's just a 0.7 millimeter lead. Nothing fantastic, just a regular pencil. Just to kind of get in all the finer details, all the little rivets, all the little bolts, all the little vents, everything like that. This character was one that's kind of a little more intricate. Normally my character designs are fairly simple. I like something that's easy to replicate, not like too simple. I mean, there's a level of it that's just like laziness, but I like to do a design that's memorable over being intricate usually. But for this character, I wanted to try something a little more intricate. I was inspired a lot by like sci-fi artwork, you know, the whole kind of like 80s desert science fiction stuff. I mean, you see a lot of Dune stuff, which is like from the more early 60s, and I guess Star Wars to an extent. You see all the weird armors and whatnot. But I kind of wanted to make this armor seem a little rusty, like maybe it had been in the elements for a while. Maybe it's been out in the world for a long time, who knows. It gives that kind of effect of making the world seem lived in, by adding all the rivets and bolts and whatnot to it. It kind of makes it seem a little more archaic than most armors. Once I'm done with the pencil, I move on to the micron pen, making sure to detail in everything. This took a very long time, and I like to be very exact with it. Normally these things don't turn out as well as it did right here. My hands are normally pretty shaky, but I think it worked out alright overall. Once I'm done with that, you'll notice that I added in the scythe gun thing. I forgot this at first. I figured it would add a little more to the piece, and I just used a ruler for that, kind of mapping everything out, being as accurate as I could. I had to go back and fix this quite a few times just due to perspective and stuff like that. It wasn't very exact. I ended up fixing it in the end though, and it turned out pretty good. Once I'm done with that, you'll see I'm moving on to the watercolors here. Once again, these are Winsor and Newton. Probably my favorite watercolors I've had in a long time. When doing watercolors, you don't want to go really heavy at first. You want to really build up the layers bit by bit. So, I mean, I went in so light with this. I actually take just a dab of them and move them over to the side and then add in water, kind of mixing them in lightly until I have pretty much just very slightly off watercolor, I suppose. Like, slightly off-colored water where it's just like water with a tinge of yellow. That way it ends up really light. I did the same with all the colors with the reds and whatnot. You'll see I had to mix a couple. Like over there, I had to mix in the reds with the yellows to kind of get that faded hood look that I wanted. For all the grays and whatnot, this set did not actually come with a gray. I had to use a watercolor pencil, kind of grind it down, and then add some water to that. And it worked out alright. Had to vary everything a little bit. I had to build up quite a few layers after getting down the base colors, making sure to add a lot of shadowing towards the front and leaving highlighted areas towards the back where the lighting would be. I really wanted to make sure to keep track of where the lighting was in this piece. As you can see, most of the parts, like the red metal on the chest and on the shoulders, on the knees, I made sure to add a lot of highlighted areas to that by just not going over them, essentially leaving a few parts white. That way they were really reflective. Everything else was kind of a duller metal, and to give that effect, I just made sure that the highlights weren't as harsh. After it had been gone over quite a few times, you'll see that the piece was kind of wrapping up there. The next step would be to put it in the printer and scan it into the computer. You can use a scanner if you want. I don't have one. I just have a regular printer. It does fine though. It scans up to 300 resolution, so it's pretty good. That's usually what I keep all my photos at anyway, so that worked out just fine. Once that's all scanned in, you have to add that image into Sketchbook Pro. Here comes the slow and boring part, which is essentially just erasing all of the white around the character, all the parts you're not going to use, so that you just have a transparent PNG of the character. Then you can kind of fiddle around with it and move it into places and whatnot. I did have to adjust a few things on here. I mean, I noticed a few, perspective problems on it. They were easy fixes though. The tools in Sketchbook Pro are really good at mimicking real life tools, and you can mix colors to kind of get a tone that matches the lines that you went with. And it turned out pretty good with all those. I like that a lot. Once that was done, I had to resize the character a little bit, making sure to keep kind of where my guidelines were, where I wanted the little blue guy at. I kind of experimented with it a little more off to the side here, but I didn't keep it, obviously. Next, I had to add in the shadow, which was done using the airbrush tool of the program. This was fairly simple. The shadow is just, shape of a human. Don't stretch it out too far because the light is directly over them. Little tip for you all, if the light is directly over top of them, it's just going to go straight down. If it's farther behind them, their shadow is going to stretch out a lot. That's just the way that shadows work. So since it was relatively right over top of them, the shadow was fairly simple. Essentially what you want to do is just imagine an imaginary line that goes up to the head of the character, and that runs to the ground, and then that's where your shadow is going to fall, is where that line meets the ground, because that's where the light is not hitting, because your character is blocking it. There are, of course, exceptions to this, multiple light sources and whatnot, but you don't have to worry about that too much. Once that shadow was added in, I duplicated the character layer, and used the airbrush tool to darken the front a little bit. I made sure to do this on a duplicate layer so that if I didn't like the effect, I could always delete that layer and go back to the original the way I had it. But this way it kind of integrates into the scene a little bit more. Once all that was done, I moved the character kind of more towards the center of the road, and bam, I had my finished piece. Not too shabby if I do say so myself. Pretty content with how it turned out. If you guys do want to see this piece, it is on the Tumblr, which I normally promote in my videos these days. It's really the only other social media I have. Yeah, feel free to go there, though. As always, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you're having a better day than I am. I hope that this recording works. But as always, guys, until next time.